All right, hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining. Today's webinar is Finding a Salesforce Consulting Partner for Nonprofit and Education. Now what? My name is Hamlett, and I am the founder and principal of Hamlett Consulting, where it is my mission to help organizations navigate and succeed in the Salesforce ecosystem, and finding the right partner is certainly a big part of that. Here's the goal for the session today: that you will gain information and insight that will help you identify and validate firms that are qualified to provide Salesforce consulting services to your nonprofit or education institution. I realize that on today's call, we have folks who are both directly from nonprofits and higher ed institutions, as well as from partners, but this information is designed to sort of apply equally well, regardless of your perspective. So for the agenda today, I wanted to start by talking about the Salesforce.org Partner Network. The impetus for this webinar, in fact, was the fact that this network has come to an end. And so I wanted to start by sharing a few thoughts about that and putting that into some context. But then the rest of the webinar will be focused on the consultant search process. And just to kind of jump ahead a little bit, as we'll see, the sunsetting of the Salesforce.org network changes a few things about this process, but the fundamentals of it are still the same. It does, though, put more importance on the AppExchange as a source of identification and validation. And so the last third of the webinar or so, we'll walk through the AppExchange, and I'll provide you with some benchmarks that you can use based on my own research to help you identify and validate the partner listings that you find there. And then hopefully we'll have time at the end for some Q&A. I do expect us to go the full hour, so settle in. And as you have questions as we go along, please feel free to put them into the Q&A panel, and I will address them as soon as I can. So first, let me tell you a little bit about myself and Hamlett Consulting. So I've been focused on nonprofit technology for the past 20 years, and I spent the first 5 working for a national nonprofit organization as their digital director. And then for the past 14 years, I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for nonprofits in a variety of roles in both product companies and services companies. And I started my own company, Hamlett Consulting, about 5 years ago with a vision of enabling better buyers and better sellers in the Salesforce nonprofit ecosystem. So to do that, I have 2 lines of business for nonprofits. I provide independent strategic guidance to enable them to be better positioned for success on Salesforce. So that includes things like needs assessments, project planning, partner selection, and implementation oversight. And then for Salesforce partners, or people interested in becoming Salesforce partners, I provide guidance to enable them to better be positioned to serve the nonprofit and education sectors. So as a result of this past 14 years, I have seen the Salesforce.org partners ecosystem up close from both the nonprofit side and the partner side. And I have seen what makes for successful partner selections. And it's from that perspective that I've developed the content I want to share with you today. This presentation draws for some other content that I've created that I want you to be aware of. I'll reference this a little bit as we go along. The first 2 are specifically for nonprofits. There's the 10-part article series, Nonprofit Guide to Choosing a Salesforce Consulting Partner. And then there's also a 1-hour deep dive video walking through how to use the AppExchange as part of a consultant search. And then the other 2 resources are specifically for Salesforce partners or aspiring partners for nonprofits. So the Partner Landscape Report is an original research report that I produced into trends in the nonprofit partner landscape over the last 4 years. And it's really designed to help firms understand how they stack up to one another in the Salesforce ecosystem. And then last year, I also put out the Intro to Doing Business in the Salesforce ecosystem for nonprofits, and again, designed for companies that want to align themselves with Salesforce in the nonprofit sector. All these resources are available on my website. The report is a paid product, but the rest are available for free. All right, so rest in peace, Salesforce.org Partner Network. Back on February 2nd, Salesforce quietly removed from their website 3 pages that had been there for many years. And these were the pages listing consulting firms that were part of the Salesforce.org partner network. There was one page for nonprofit partners, one page for education partners, and one for international partners. And if you go to where this information used to live on the Salesforce.org website, so if you go to the support tab and then click these links here, find a nonprofit partner, find an education partner, rather than taking you to a few hundred firms that Salesforce.org had vetted, this now takes you to the consulting landing page on the AppExchange, where you are presented with an undifferentiated list of now over 2,200 firms. So my first piece of guidance today is if you click those links now, just know this is no longer a curated list of firms that you're being sent to. It's every single Salesforce consulting partner. Salesforce has not made an official announcement, at least that I've seen, about the ending of the partner network, though I have confirmed it with people inside of Salesforce.org. My understanding is that this is the latest step in the merging of Salesforce.org into the broader Salesforce organization. And that's a process that began when Salesforce acquired Salesforce.org 4 years ago. So I can't really speak to the why. I can speculate, of course, but I can speak to what I see as the impact of this change. So first, I just want to start with putting this change into some context. So Salesforce itself was started in 1999. And in that same year, the Salesforce Foundation also launched to be the philanthropic arm of Salesforce. And to me, this is still one of the special parts of the Salesforce story, that even before they were making any money, they had already decided that they wanted to be about something more in the world than just corporate profits. So if you fast forward from 1999 to 2004, and if you would have visited the Salesforce Foundation website, which is what Salesforce.org was part of at the time, you would have noticed that this page under their service tab, that it called out the fact that Salesforce was being used by approximately 100 nonprofit organizations. But what you won't find on this page in 2004 is any mention of consulting partners. For that, you would have needed to go not to the AppExchange because it didn't exist yet. You would have gone to the Salesforce.com website, where you would have seen a list of around 40 total consulting partners. So if we jump ahead again from 2004 to 2005 to the same page, now Salesforce is claiming that it's used by 400 nonprofit organizations. And now for the first time, they're providing a link to nonprofit implementation partners. And if you were to have clicked that link, you would have seen this. This is a PDF of a spreadsheet. Yes, that is how Salesforce rolled back in 2005. And this spreadsheet listed 8 firms. So very early on, 18 years ago, the Salesforce Foundation was providing a curated list of partners that it had deemed to be qualified, or at the very least interested in providing Salesforce services to nonprofits. And by the way, by my counts, 2 of the firms on this list from 18 years ago are still around and providing services for nonprofits, Exponent Partners and Swift River. It's pretty cool. So let's fast forward again to 2009, 4 years later. There's a new look for the Salesforce Foundation website, and they have now moved from a PDF to a paginated directory here directly on the site. And the list has grown now from 8 partners to 19 partners over that 4-year span. And then finally, if we fast forward once more to 2015, this is the year now that the Salesforce.org partner network, which was known as the Salesforce Foundation Partner Program at the time, officially launched. So for the first time, there are now articulated specific criteria that firms need to meet in order to be part of this network. Those criteria are aligned to both different membership tiers, as well as to the 2 different sectors, nonprofit and education. And Salesforce has articulated the benefits that partners would get based upon their alignments to the various tiers. And in that year, there were now 34 partners that were officially part of the network when it launched. So that's kind of how things got started. Over the next 8 years, the network would continue to grow. This is based on my own annual sampling of the number of partners as of June in each of the past 8 years. And you can see that from 2015, they grew from 34 partners to then 128 last year. And by 2022, there were an additional 162 firms outside of the US, what they call their international partners or their EMEA partners, also part of the partner network. As I mentioned, the partner network was divided into sectors. So there were the nonprofit aligned partners. As of last year, there were 113 of those. There were also education aligned partners, and there were 37 last year. And then I mentioned there are also tiers that partners would align to. So you can see in the nonprofit sector, the vast majority of partners were at the registered tier, kind of the entry level tier. Whereas in education, partners were more evenly split between the registered tier and the premium tier, the top tier in the program. So what were those criteria? What did it take for a firm to be included in the Salesforce.org partner network at those tiers? So these were the requirements as of last year. First, in the column here to the right, you had to be a Salesforce.com partner. That was the place you started. And then above and beyond that, depending on your tier, you needed to have a certain number of consultant certifications in your firm. And you can see that started at 2 for registered partners, all the way up to 15 for premium partners. In addition, you had to have a certain number of industry certifications. So these were either nonprofit cloud consultant certifications if you were in the nonprofit sector, or education cloud certifications if you were in the education sector. So it wasn't just about total certifications, it was about having those specific certifications that were relevant to nonprofits and higher ed. You also had to have completed a certain number of projects in those sectors over the prior 18 months. And you had to receive a customer satisfaction rating of at least 4 out of 5 stars for each of those projects. So there is a requirement around the actual work that you're doing in the sector, as well as customer ratings of that work. So in general, the .org network was imposing a more stringent set of criteria specific to nonprofit and education that any Salesforce partner could participate in, but they had to comply with that criteria. You'll also notice that there was a monetary component. There's actually 2 monetary components to being part of the partner network. The first was that to advance to higher tiers beyond registered, you had to deliver a certain amount of ACV to Salesforce. So what does that mean? That means over the course of the year, for all the clients that your firm worked with, you had to be the partner of record for customer license purchases from Salesforce. And those customer purchases had to add up to the minimums that you saw here. So if you wanted to go from registered to impact, you would have to influence $100,000 worth of client purchases from Salesforce. So that was the first monetary component. The second was that there was a program fee that partners had to pay that ranged from $500 for the registered tier up to $10,000 for the premium tier. And then you can also see the benefits that partners would get at each level. Things like access to sales enablement materials, partner badges, access to roadmaps and product trainings. And then at higher levels, partners would get a designated partner manager, would get access to attend Salesforce.org's annual sales kickoff, would get access to the Salesforce Partner Advisory Board. I can't speak to whether or how Salesforce is going to continue to offer any of these benefits going forward, or kind of what the criteria will be for that. But we just know that this partner program as it existed last year is no longer an option for partners to align to. So what's the impact of that? What is this going to mean for the sector? And these are my conclusions as of now. I reserve the right to change my mind as additional information becomes available. So if we start here and thinking about what's the downside of this network going away, for the firms that have been part of the network, I see a couple of things. The first is they have lost a means by which they can signal their intention to serve these sectors and receive validation from Salesforce that they were a vetted and aligned partner. So it's a loss of a source of validation to the market. And then also its potential loss of access. These partners now, as a result, may have less access to people and resources at Salesforce, which could in turn hurt their ability to reach customers and grow their business. I really don't know how that's going to play out, but that's something that occurs to me. And then the downside for customers is that now for nonprofits and education, they have lost a source by which they could identify and validate firms that were aligned and equipped to serve the sectors. Is there any upside to the partner network going away? So, as I see it, for partners, this has reduced some of the cost and overhead associated with being a Salesforce partner. In turn, for firms that did not want to participate in the network, either due to costs or other requirements such as ACV, they are now put on equal footing with firms that had garnered status in the network. So, in other words, not being part of the network is no longer a reason a partner might be passed over by clients or by Salesforce itself. Is there going to be any upside for customers in this change? Well, if there's no longer that specific ACV requirement that partners have to reach to drive to advanced levels in the program, maybe there will be less sales pressure from partners put on clients to buy licenses. I'm not sure about that. There is still an ACV requirement to move to higher tiers within the Salesforce.com partner network, so that hasn't gone away. And then, another potential upside again is that by removing Salesforce.org as a gatekeeper of partners, it does potentially open doors for organizations to discover a wider world of nonprofit and education consultants. So just to kind of conclude here, membership in the Salesforce.org partner network was never the only tool that nonprofits had to identify and validate qualified partners. It was never an exhaustive list of every possible option. In fact, if you were looking for a solo consultant, you generally would not have found them among Salesforce.org's partners. It also didn't guarantee that a given partner was going to be a great fit for a given nonprofit, nor that one of these vetted partners would do great work on every project. But on balance, I think it was an important piece of the puzzle. I'm sorry to see it go away. But now the question is, what happens next? So one thing that I have done is that I have archived the list of partner network members as of 2022 on my website, because I do still think this can be a useful checkpoint, at least in the short term. Maybe less so as time goes by, but if you're just looking for a snapshot of who was a qualified partner as of last year, you can still get that list on my website. And that's all I'm really going to plan to say about the .org partner network. So if that's the main reason you came to the webinar, you're welcome to depart. But what I want to do from here is now turn to a recommended process that I have put together for identifying and validating partners, and especially how to use the AppExchange as part of that. Okay, so for organizations that are looking for a consulting partner, what is the goal? This is my working definition of what it means to have found the right partner. So I'll just go ahead and read this. So the goal is to go from thousands of possible options to one consulting partner who provides the services you need to organizations like yours, who can staff your project on your budget and timeline, with people with the right qualifications, and who do so in a way that works for your organization. How will you reach that goal? You will need to conduct a good selection process. This is my outline for that process. And this really takes you through these initial phases of preparation all the way through the kickoff with your partner. I'm not going to go into detail on every step of this today. As I mentioned, the nonprofit guide earlier, this gets into detail on each step in this process. But I do just want to call out a couple of things. First of all, it is a multi-step process. I gave the phases rhyming names so I could remember them, but it's not an overnight type of thing. It is going to be something that your organization will need to put some time and effort into in order to get the best outcomes. The prepare stage is what we're going to talk about today. So this is where you're going to identify your needs as an organization. You're going to validate those internally, and then you're going to go and do your research. These first three phases can really be as formal or as informal as you want to make them. Often what happens is as you sort of do an articulation of your needs and go out to find partners, you're going to learn things in the process. Either maybe you haven't captured your needs well, maybe you haven't cast the right net for partners. So you may find you need to kind of iterate on these first few phases in order to kind of get down to your short list of firms that you're going to be trying to move forward with proposals. Okay, so as I mentioned, 3 steps in the prepare phase. The first one is identify your needs, or at least what you think you need a partner to do for your organization. In general, the high-level questions you want to ask are, who are you? Where are you now? Where are you planning to go? And how are you planning to get there? And if you go to my guide, part 6, you'll see I have a number of specific questions underneath each of one of those broad questions to kind of help you work through what this looks like for your organization. The reason for doing this is because these are the kinds of questions that a prospective partner is going to ask you in order for them to be able to assess whether they're going to be a fit for you and be able to help you meet your goals with your Salesforce project. So the clearer you can get about these in advance, the better guidance you'll be able to give a partner, and then the better guidance they can give you in terms of what it's going to take to get your project done. So that's step 1. Step 2 is validating internally. So, and again, four pieces here. So you want to be sure that once you've identified those needs, that you have internal agreement about what the needs are. Have you captured them correctly based on the perspective of all the stakeholders that are involved? Secondly, your organization believes that Salesforce technology, either through a new implementation or through enhancement or expansion, can address those needs. The third is that you've validated that your organization does not have the internal skills or capacity to effectively apply Salesforce to your needs on your desired timeline. So those are kind of 3 variables there, right? You might have the skills, but not the capacity to do it on a certain timeline, or you might have all the time in the world to work with, but you don't have the skills that you need to get the work done. So again, another point of validation before you go external. And then finally, that your organization has a budget, both for the necessary technology services, and you have an internal agreement to proceed with pursuing a partner. And as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be some iteration to this, right? Because initially, you may not really know whether Salesforce is a fit, or you may not really know what your budget should be for the process. So there may be a little bit of back and forth with prospective partners to kind of dial that in better. I also would just like to go ahead and put in a shameless plug for my own services here. So if, as you're going through this with your organization and your answer to these questions is no, or you're not sure, that's where an independent advisor like me can come in and help to help you to drive towards some clarity about that. So as you go out to identify partners, keep in mind that there is a wide spectrum of who partners are and what they do. Partners can be similar or different to each other across many factors. Here are 3 of the big ones to be aware of in my book. The first is services. So, there was a point in time where Salesforce was basically one thing. It was just a CRM for really for corporate sales. And there was one type of license you could get with different flavors, but essentially just a login to the CRM. Now, of course, Salesforce is 16 different product families. It's over 40 different things you can purchase. And as a result, Salesforce partners offer a wide spectrum of services around Salesforce. And those can include things like planning services, implementation, of course, is what we typically think of, support services, and then other things like change management, UI, UX services, data analytics, right? And the list continues to grow as the Salesforce platform itself grows. So that's one thing you want to be aware of. Not every partner is going to offer every type of service. The second is around focus. And this has a few dimensions. So Some partners focus only on specific industries. Some focus on multiple industries. So some partners only do nonprofit projects or only do education projects. Some firms do projects in lots of industries. Similarly, some firms are going to focus on a single functional area. So maybe they just do consulting services around fundraising or around recruiting and admissions in higher ed. And then again, some firms can service you across multiple functional areas. And then again, some partners only focus on a single Salesforce cloud. Maybe they just do work inside of nonprofit cloud. Other firms may do work in nonprofit cloud and experience cloud and commerce cloud. And then beyond that, partners may provide services across multiple technologies. Maybe they can help you with WordPress. Maybe they can help you with Power BI. So these are, again, dimensions that you want to just understand as you're going out and looking for partners. And then finally, size, right? And I alluded to this earlier. There's, hundreds, if not thousands of soloists, independent consultants out there who have varying levels of services and focus in their own solo businesses. There are, of course, traditional multi-person consulting firms, and they're global corporations that are Salesforce partners. So again, you're going to be wanting to think about what's the right size firm. You're going to want to understand the size of the firm you're talking to, and then try to get a sense for what's the right size firm for your organization's needs. All right. So then when you're ready to go out and find a partner, what are the sources available to you to do that? And as I see it, there are two broad categories of sources for partner identification and validation. There are indirect sources for that and direct. So direct is whatever information you are getting directly one-on-one from a consulting partner to your organization. And then indirect is what you get from everywhere else. And in general, you're going to need to use both types of these sources. But for efficiency's sake, you will want to have done a fair amount of work in the indirect column to be sure you have narrowed things down as much as possible before you go directly to partners themselves. So first of all, here under indirect, three types of indirect sources. The first is referrals. This is where you're either talking to people you know already, so people inside your organization, people at other organizations who have worked with Salesforce or worked with a consulting firm, people you don't know, which would include folks in maybe networks you're part of, so LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, N10, AFP, Slack channels you're part of, and then your Salesforce account executive. So most nonprofits have a Salesforce AE assigned. And so for each of these groups, you can ask them questions kind of the identification type. So do you know of a consultant who XYZ, fill in the blank with the needs you've identified, as well as questions of validation, which would be, what can you tell me about consulting firm XYZ? One thing I'll just call out here is that in terms of the Salesforce account executives, they do tend to be assigned to organizations based on size. So any partners they would have worked with would likely have worked with organizations around the same size as yours, which is good to know. However, account executives don't always have the widest purview on the total range of partners. They tend to have their favorites. So you never want to let the recommendation from the Salesforce account executive be the only recommendation that you take when looking for a partner. The second category here is research. And so we've already talked about the fact that the Salesforce Partner Network is no longer an option for research. So that does put more spotlight on the AppExchange. Again, I'll be talking about that here more in just a second. There are also directories of various sorts that you can tap into online of partner firms. So for kind of traditional consulting firms, sites like G2 and Clutch will let you do comparisons and read customer reviews of these partner firms. There are other directories that tend to focus more on soloists. So sites like Philanthroforce, Nonprofitist, even Upwork can be a source of independent consultants. And then there are also staffing firms that focus on providing Salesforce resources. So groups like Fortify 10K advisors in Third Republic. Just one thing you want to be aware of just in general with directories, and this is true to the AppExchange to a certain extent, is there can be sort of pay to play aspects to those. So just kind of take that with a grain of salt, or at least be aware of what the terms of participation are in those directories. And then finally, web search. So I don't have to tell you too much about how to use Google, but one thing that I found can be helpful as you're thinking about your organization and your Salesforce needs, think about your peer organizations. Who are the other nonprofits out there that are like yours in terms of mission and size and so forth? And then search for that organization on your favorite search engine, plus the word Salesforce. Because of how widely Salesforce is used, the chances are good you might get some results that come back either, could be actual case studies that have been written about the ways that organization has used Salesforce, or at the very least, you may find job postings related to Salesforce. And then so from there, you can kind of take that information over to LinkedIn and try to find someone at the organization you can speak to as a referral. And then the final category here is a reference. Again, I think we're all familiar with references, but the distinction I make here is that, versus a referral, a reference is where you're speaking to the person who has worked directly with the firm and who can speak to their performance on a specific scope of work. So not just that they were kind of in the organization when it happened, but they were a part of the actual Salesforce project and the delivery of that project in their organization. Okay, so that's it in terms of the indirect sources. And then for directs, again, this is where you're speaking directly with prospective consultants. This will be in the form of initial conversations, presentations that they may give you, any pre-sales discovery work they do to understand your needs and try to think about how they can address them, proposals they give you, your interviews of their staff, and then ultimately a statement of work. So these are all sources that you can use as you go through the process to validate whether or not a partner is a good fit. And then finally, just note that this too is an iterative process. As you go along, you will learn things that will cause you to either broaden or narrow your search. So again, just be prepared that it can take some time, and give yourself as much time as you can to conduct the process thoroughly. All right, so we've discussed the sources by which you can identify and validate a partner's fit, but then what constitutes a fit? So 4 areas of criteria that I've identified, and there's some sub-criteria underneath. And so I'll go through these kind of quickly, but just want to kind of give you a feel for the things you're going to be looking for as you talk to both the indirect as well as direct sources of identification and validation. So the 4 areas: business focus, service focus and experience, staff qualifications and capacity, and then a category that I call other. So here's that first category of business focus. So let me just quickly orient you to this chart. So we've got the criteria listed here on the left. The importance, so this is whether or not the criteria is a must-have or if it's a nice-to-have, and then how you're going to verify it by either direct means or indirect means. And you'll see most criteria can be validated either way, except some are going to require direct validation from the partner. And then I also have added an indicator here to the left, these color-coded circles, as to whether or not you can validate this information on the AppExchange, kind of fully validate it, whether you can partially or maybe possibly validate it on the AppExchange is the lighter colored circle, and then the empty circle that's information you're not gonna find on the AppExchange. Okay, so under business focus, first criteria: do they provide Salesforce services? It's a pretty obvious one, but don't overlook that. Make sure that whoever you're talking to actually does provide Salesforce services. Have they provided them to nonprofits or higher ed? That's going to be ideal, not necessarily a hard requirement, right? The more of that prior experience they have, the higher the likelihood they'll be able to come in and understand your needs and address them through their services. But you certainly could use a firm that had general Salesforce experience. With the number of partners there are today, you really probably shouldn't settle for that. but just know that, that's not necessarily a hard requirement in my book. Is serving nonprofits and higher ed a focus of their business? Okay, so to me, that's what's going to be of highest value, is if not only if they've done some work in nonprofit and higher ed, but it's part of their intentional mission as a business to serve the sectors, because they're going to be making investments and choices that are in alignment with that, as opposed to something maybe they just do on the side. And then notice these first three have an asterisk beside them. So these are all three things that the Salesforce.org partner network was great at validating. If a firm was a part of that network, you knew all three of these things were true for them. Unfortunately, not an option anymore. And then finally, do they work with organizations like yours? So I mentioned earlier that not every Salesforce provides every type of service related to, not every partner provides every type of service related to Salesforce, and not every partner serves every type of organization. So, partners are going to want to understand those things that I was calling out in the prepare stage of identify your needs, right? What size organization are you? What's your budget? What's your mission? What's your location? If you can't find a partner that works with organizations like yours, you need to keep looking. So that's business focus. Services focus and experience. So do they provide the services that you need? This is a must-have. By services, I mean both the technology type. So do they work within the right Salesforce clouds or right Salesforce products to address your needs? And do they provide the right services types that you're looking for, whether that's planning, implementation, or support, or other? Have they provided them to organizations like yours in the past? Again, nice to have. And have they provided the services you need to an organization like yours for similar needs or use cases? So again, here we're getting more and more specific towards how relevant the partner's prior experience is to your own organization. These three things can be partially or possibly validated on the AppExchange. As we'll see, the AppExchange does provide indications related to the types of project work organizations have done before and some of the functional areas. So that's a little bit more of kind of a harder validation or a more definitive validation point. Beyond that, partners often use the AppExchange as a place to generally talk about the firm, the work they do, the services they provide. So it's a little bit more of a kind of a softer testament to their services, but something you may also find on the AppExchange, or maybe not, maybe through their website or other channels. Third set of criteria, staff qualifications and capacity. So do they have today staff who are qualified to do the work that you need? And again, by qualification, I mean both the technical knowledge, they know nonprofit cloud, they know experience cloud, and do they have experience in actually executing projects with those technology? Again, this is a must-have. Firms can have done thousands of nonprofit projects for organizations just like yours. If they no longer have the staff on their team to do that, it's not going to be that helpful to you. The next criteria, can they staff your project with qualified people who have done similar work at similar organizations? Again, nice to have, right? If they've just done, experience cloud work at other nonprofits, but not quite like yours, that's great. But if they can have demonstrated examples of doing it for organizations like yours, even better. Can they staff your project with qualified people on your timeline and budget? So notice this is the one I say is both a must-have and a nice-to-have. It's nice to have earlier on in the process, because you may find in your conversations with partners that maybe you need to change your timeline in order to better match what it's going to take to get your project done. Or maybe you're willing to, wait a month or two until the right people can come available to do the work for you. Or maybe you find you need to allocate additional budget to your project to get it done well. So, earlier in the process, it's a nice to have. Ultimately, it's a must have. And then finally, have they put the plan in writing for doing so? So have they given you a statement of work that specifically says, these people with these qualifications will be doing this scope of work for your organization, ultimately something you're going to have. And then the final set of criteria here, a little bit of a catch-all: how, where, when, why. So The first one is, does their methodology align with how you want to work? This is, everything from like a true project methodology in terms of if they use waterfall or agile. It also can be things like, what are their support hours? If you're hiring them for managed support, what are their, what hours are they staffing the support desk? How much project management time or change management time are they allocating to your project, et cetera? Does the location of their team meet your needs? So, their partners across the US, around the world. Is it important to you to have resources that are local to you who can be on site? Or, does that not matter? Sometimes time zone can be a factor. If they're on the West Coast and you're on the East Coast, it may affect the hours that you can meet with them during the workday. So just, again, something to think about. Depends on whether that's going to be important to you or not. Same with culture. So are their culture and values in alignment with yours as an organization? Do they have any special sauce? So is there anything that sets them apart, or have they won industry awards? Do they have relevant areas of specialization? Have they developed any IP, any products or solutions or accelerators or partnerships that could benefit your project? And then finally, are you satisfied that there is a good fit? So this is the sum total of all those other criteria plus the impression that you've gotten with them. This is where you're doing a gut check to say, in all of our interactions with the firm, have they been professional? Have they been timely and respectful? Do their references confirm that they provide a good customer experience, right? It's all the difference in the world as to whether you meet your destination in a very smooth way versus a very bumpy way. And then finally, can you see the particular members of your team who will be aligned to your project working well with the members of their team? Those are all things that you are ultimately going to need to be satisfied with in order to know that you've got a good fit in the partner that you're selecting. Okay, so all of that then kind of taking together should get us to our stated goal, which is finding a firm that provides the services you need to organizations like yours, who can staff your project on your budget and timeline with people with the right qualifications, and do so in a way that works for your organization. All right, so we're heading to the home stretch. I'm going to talk a little bit about the AppExchange now. If you all have questions, again, please feel free to use the Q&A panel. And let's jump into the AppExchange. Now, the one thing I want to say here is that safe harbor, because what I'm going to share with you is subject to change. In fact, today is day one. March 1st is the launch date for the new Salesforce partner year. So I would not be surprised if we see some changes to how things are included on the AppExchange here in the coming weeks. So, just be sure to kind of check that against the things that I'm going to share with you here now. So to get to the AppExchange, it's appexchange.salesforce.com. This is the official Salesforce partner directory now. So if you click on the Salesforce Consultants tab and then the Consultants sub-tab, this will take you to the consulting section on the AppExchange. There's one other thing I want to call out here. If you go to latest collections up in the navigation bar on AppExchange, from here you can find firms that are Black owned, that are women owned, Latinx owned, and AAPI owned. These distinctions are unfortunately not found anywhere else on the AppExchange, so you have to intentionally go to this section if you're looking for firms that have those qualities. So I'm going to start by showing you the anatomy of an AppExchange consultant listing, and then we're going to come back and talk about how to use search on the AppExchange. Actually, first, let me share some metrics with you. So as I mentioned, I wanted to kind of give you some benchmark data so you'll have a sense of what you're looking at. When you see numbers, is that a big number? Is that a small number? Do a lot of partners have that? Do not a lot of partners have that? That's where this partner research can come in handy. And so the first data points I want to share with you here on this main page for the AppExchange is for the firms that were part of the Salesforce.org partner network in 2022, 8.5% of those firms, so almost 1 in 10, were not on the AppExchange. So firms, even though they are Salesforce partners, are not required to create AppExchange listings. So just be aware of that. And then also 0% of the firms on the AppExchange who were part of the Salesforce.org network we're solo consultants. So if you were looking for a smaller firm, like a one-person resource for your Salesforce project, of the firms that were in the .org network, none of them kind of fit that bill. Okay, so I've chosen Imagine CRM Consulting as my example here, just kind of just because they're kind of representative of a lot of firms that were Salesforce.org network partners. This is what a listing looks like. So I want to draw your attention to a few areas of the listing. We'll start here in the upper left. So you'll see a star rating. This is the customer satisfaction rating for this partner, the CSAT score, it's also called. You'll see how many projects they've completed as a Salesforce partner, how many certified experts they have, what year they were founded, and then everything here sort of below that bar on the landing page for consultants is marketing content. So this is information that the firm itself has put on the page. There's really no validation from Salesforce of this, but again, can be a useful place for you to learn more about the partner and validate some of those other criteria we talked about earlier. All right, so let's drill into some of these specific numbers that we see. So year founded, this is information that the partner provides. This is not validated by Salesforce. And this is going to give you a sense for the maturity and longevity of the firm. However, it doesn't necessarily tell you how long the firm has been doing Salesforce work, nor does it tell you how long they've been doing Salesforce work for nonprofits and education. It also doesn't tell you how much experience the individuals on your project will bring. So a firm can have been around for 20 years, but if the person on your project doesn't bring more than a year's worth of experience, that 20 years of firm experience is not going to be as valuable to you. In terms of some benchmarks here, so last year, 12 was the median number for years in business in the EMEA region, and pretty much the same 13 years in the EMEA region. So what that means is that half of the firms that were Salesforce.org partners had been in business for longer than 12 years. Half of the firms had been in business for less than 12 years. So again, as you're looking at a particular firm's listing and it says it was founded in 2015, is that great? Is that not great? You can kind of get a sense for how the longevity of the firm compares to others in the network. Also, by the way, I use median here just because averages are not that helpful given the wide spectrum of who Salesforce.org network partners were. Everyone from small two-person shops all the way up to global corporations. The averages tended to be pretty skewed towards the larger partners. So I find median is a more helpful number. Again, just to kind of help you see, is this partner in the top half for this particular metric or in the bottom half? All right, the second number here is Salesforce verified consultants, or also known as certified experts. So this is the number of staff in the firm who have achieved a qualifying credential, primarily a consultant level certification, and this has been verified by Salesforce. Okay, so this is a hard number that's been verified by Salesforce. Why is this useful? It's because this is going to indicate the relative ability of a firm to bring a technically qualified person to your project, right? A firm that has 40 certified consultants has more potential capacity for your project than a firm that has 2. However, being certified does not necessarily mean you have relevant experience as a consultant, right? True confessions, I have a Pardot consultant certification. You would not want me doing your Pardot project because I've never actually done one. I got the certification in anticipation of doing work, never ended up doing the work. So, that kind of thing happens all the time. And then secondly, as before, the presence of an expert in the company doesn't guarantee that such a person will be on your project. So it's important as you go through your partner validation that you confirm they can actually bring someone with the right expertise to your particular project. Also, just know this is a point in time number. So this will change as people come and go from the firm. It'll also change as people gain or lose certifications. In terms of our benchmark data, so for firms in the .org partner network last year, the median was 11 certified experts. So half had more than 11, half had less than 11. And the number was 14 in EMEA. Okay, the next number is Salesforce verified projects or projects completed. This is how many total projects the firm logged with Salesforce. And beyond just the partner telling Salesforce we did this project, in order for that project to count, Salesforce must receive a validated customer review in order for that to be included. So again, this is a number that Salesforce verifies in the sense that every partner's customer has to verify that the project work was done. And again, this is going to give you a sense of the relative level of Salesforce project experience. This number, doesn't tell you necessarily how many projects the firm has done for nonprofits or education. So that's going to depend upon the level of focus or specialization of the firm. It also doesn't tell you what type of project or what the scope of the project was. Was it a planning project? Was it implementation? Was it managed support? That's not detailed out here. Median number in 2022 was 65. So half of firms had done more than 65 projects, half had done less. This is a cumulative lifetime number, so this number will only go up. This number will never get smaller for a firm. And then finally, the star rating. So this is the average number of stars on a scale of 1 to 5 that have been given to the firm by customers submitting reviews to Salesforce. So something that, a couple things to understand here, that for a review to be verified, that means that it came as a result of the partner logging the project with Salesforce, Salesforce sending the survey to the customer, and the customer completing the survey. However, anyone can actually come in and submit a review on a partner, and there's no verification of those reviews. And so the star rating is a blend of kind of those verified and unverified, so just something to be aware of. And then you can see from the benchmark data, nearly every partner in the .org network had a 5-star rating. So if you've got, I think, 4.8 or above, the AppExchange shows 5 stars. So it's wonderful that firms, have such great client satisfaction scores, but not really much of a differentiator as you're looking between firms. Okay, and then the last tab I really want to spend time on here. So if you'll just notice as we go between these two pages, there are actually 2 other tabs, expertise and reviews. So don't miss those, because the expertise tab really gets into the weeds about the kinds of specific project experience the partner has had. Let's start here with the total Salesforce verified certifications. So we saw the number of people here under certified experts. This tells us how many certifications are held across all the people in the firm. And again, it's going to kind of give you a sense of the relative capacity of that firm to serve you in specific functional areas within Salesforce. So you can see the median number there last year was 63 for US partners, 89 for international partners. The next set of numbers here are specific cloud certifications or certifications of specific types. So this is going to get even more granular about how many people in the firm actually have certifications that'll be relevant to your project, whether it's, again, nonprofit cloud, experience cloud, and so forth. You can see the numbers here from the benchmark. The median for nonprofit cloud among all .org's network partners last year, there were a median of 3 nonprofit clouds, so not a lot. Even fewer for education cloud, only 2 per firm, a median that had that certification. Of course, the numbers could go much higher than that, but also could go lower. Experience Cloud 4, Marketing Cloud 2, Pardot 2, Surface Cloud 5. And then we get into Navigator. This is fairly esoteric, but I just want to highlight a couple of things here. If you go to my full webinar on the AppExchange, I really get into the weeds on this, but I just want you to know that this is a proprietary formula that Salesforce uses to calculate these specialization levels, levels 1, level 2, and expert. And it's divided into 2 areas. So Salesforce expertise relates to what product areas the firm has done work in, plus the relevant specialization areas that a firm, the relevant specializations that the firm holds in that area. So for example, to be a level 1 specialist for nonprofit cloud, you have to have done, I believe it's 3 nonprofit cloud projects in the last 2 or 3 years. and you have to have at least one nonprofit cloud certification on your staff. So it's kind of combining those two things together, plus CSAT score. All of those projects have to have a minimum CSAT score threshold. Okay. So, so this is where you can see the specific Salesforce product areas, also called Salesforce expertise. So has the firm done project work, and does it hold certifications in, Experience Cloud, Nonprofit Cloud, Sales Cloud, and so forth. And then industry expertise is more generic than that. It's looking at the projects that are done within a certain industry. So this gets a little bit more to the heart of, has the nonprofit done work for has the firm done work for nonprofits or higher ed before? If so, again, certain thresholds of project counts will get them to a level 1 or level 2 for what's called Salesforce.org sectors. You can see last year, 63% of partners in the network had nonprofit cloud navigator status of at least level 1, and 17% had navigator status for Salesforce experience for education cloud. In terms of the Salesforce.org sectors, this is where the numbers get pretty big. So 77% of all of .org's partners last year had at least a level 1 for Salesforce.org sectors. 18% were level 2 in education, 50% were level 2 in nonprofit. Just in terms of takeaways here, what's the right way to go about identifying and validating a partner? Always start with what your needs are and making sure you've got clarity about those and validating those internally. Just because a firm has done it before does not mean they can do it again, or that they want to with your organization. So you have to be sure you've confirmed that. Always meet and interview the specific people who will be on your project to be sure that they have the relevant experience and credentials and are a fit for your organization. Be the partner you want to have. Success is a two-way street. It's going to depend as much upon you as it does your partner. So be prepared to do your part and give yourself plenty of time. Speaking of time, we are out of it. I just want to say thank you again for being here, and have a great rest of your day.